So this video will review our assignment for our summative assessment for Act 1, Scene 2 of A Raisin in the Sun, which is our mind map. Just a review is that we're including 6 quotes over the entire Act 1, Scene 2. And with each quote, you want to think about your signpost reading strategies, your annotating strategies. So let's review what those signpost strategies are. These are in your notebook. They're the signpost strategies for fiction, and we do have 6 of them. So we talked about these in class. Contrasts and contradictions when a character either changes him or herself from one part of the scene to another or from one part of the play to another. Another way we can do a contrast and contradiction would be when a character and another character go against each other to create a contrast. We've talked about the differences in age, generational contrasts. In Act 1, Scene 2, pay attention to gender, men versus women, expectations between characters, their tone or attitude or point of view or perspective between characters. Remember, we've been talking a lot about Beneatha's character and how Beneatha comes from below and rises above as a symbol of women in general and African American women at the start of the civil rights movement. And so she is this character who is against or really wanting to take a stand or rebelling against her family members. And so she really is that contrast or contradiction. So pay attention, especially to her role, what she says to different characters, how they respond to her, and just the interactions between the two. Remember that her boyfriend, George, the first man she's interested from Act 1, Scene 1, even think about a contrast between George and the other person she's interested in, Joseph Assegai. And we do meet Joseph Assegai in Act 1, Scene 2, so pay attention to his interactions with Beneatha. You can also look at a contrast in mood. And remember that a metaphor and simile, right? They take two different things and put them together. And so that in itself is a contrast. Contradiction would be something that more along the lines of within a character. So something that a character did, and then they're contradicting themselves and they do something differently. And then quickly, just to go over the other signpost, we have the aha moment, which is the moment that a character has this understanding or realization or new learning. We have tough questions, which is when a character will ask a question or not even ask a question. Sometimes, we do question without asking a question and we're wondering about something. And so anything they really wonder about can be a tough question. Words to the wiser is when a character, usually older, so in this case we have Mama, will give advice. And then again and again would be moments of repetition when you see something happen again or again, or a symbol or an image or a metaphor pop up again and again. And then memory moment is when a character will remember the past. With all of these signposts, you really want to pay attention to the impact or effect of the signpost on a character. How does that show characterization or development of character? So when you're annotating and you're looking at your signpost, you refer back to your rubric, go to the middle part of your rubric, which is the reasoning part when you're thinking about your quotes and what they mean. And in order to determine if it is worthy of putting on your mind map, you really want to pay attention to these 4 bullets in the very middle of your rubric and ask yourself these questions. And in fact, these questions, the responses or answers to these questions will be your reasoning. And you can use this word elicit, right? We've been talking about this word to bring out. So you can say, that this is an example of a contrast and contradiction because it elicits characterization of Beneatha when we see Beneatha do X, Y, and Z or interact with this person in this way. So ultimately, right, you want to talk about how that signpost tells you more or elicits characterization, change in character, interactions, a difference in mood, um, and or a theme or a message. And so this is really your reasoning. So always focus on that impact or so what, and ask yourself those questions. So let's just review. Once you have annotated Act 1, Scene 2, that is 30-point summative, is annotating across the scene for those 6 signposts. Then you want to choose your top signposts, 6 of them, and they need to represent 3 different signpost categories. So I give you some examples of how you can mix and match. So 6 examples across the scene, and cover at least 3 of the signposts, okay? Now, when you write your quote on your mind map, you want to write the quote, the speaker of the quote, and then you want to cite the quote in parentheses like we've been practicing, and that's highlighted here with the page number. This is really what your mind map will look like. Now, this is a different play, right? So you can put the title of our play, Act 1, Scene 2. And this particular student has chosen to take each of the signposts. You don't have to do that. You can just do 3 of the signposts, but you're still looking at 6 different quotes and 3 sentences of reasoning per quote. And that's all on the rubric. The other page we were looking at. And so you do notice that this person has labeled what the signpost is. And then there is the quote, and the speaker, and then the reasoning. And so it is 3 sentences. If you go back to the rubric, in this reasoning section, really important to pay attention to the criteria. And I tell you exactly how to get an A+, right here on the left. So for, the majority of the quotes, 3 sentences of reasoning, you incorporate some reasoning starters. And this is really important to extend your sentence beyond just this is an example of a contrast and contradiction. We need to get to play around with these verbs: resulting in, eliciting, illustrating, which demonstrates, which illustrates. Even adding these little words, how, when, will push you to provide more detail and extend your reasoning. And that's really what we're practicing. On the back of the rubric, I do give you very clear examples on the left of what will not earn full credit. And on the right, what you can do with very specific words, like we just talked about, in order to provide more detail and extend your reasoning. So even use these phrases, right? You can write down these phrases and incorporate them into your reasoning. So this is a really great resource. And of course, you do have your reasoning guide in your notebook if you would like to use that as well. Let's just notice how this student developed their reasoning for this contrast and contradiction example. This quote makes us think that Troy is an honest man and is the best idol that everyone wants to follow. However, and then that word really does indicate a contrast, right? However, as we read, we get disillusioned. So they're using the vocabulary that we have learned by Troy, by this character, as we realize that Troy is not completely an honest person. He cheats on his wife, and this dishonesty can be seen in his continued insistence at the idea that he was wronged in his. So she continues, right, and extends. And then with the again and again, let's notice how they incorporate how it is repetition. These are phrases that are repeated by Rose almost after every word Troy says. The author brings this up because extends the reasoning. He highlights, he wants to highlight Rose's character. So again, getting into how it impacts characterization. And then goes on and talks about how it does impact character. Sorry, I thought I paused. Okay, so this right here, this tough question can be extended. Like this is not a full 3 sentences, and so you can see where the student can do a little bit more and go back to the reasoning prompts if they're lost from the rubric and answer some of these questions right here. So these 4 bullets I've had you highlight and circle in class. They're really important to go back to as you're thinking about your reasoning. Finally, the last step down here is to think of some universal ideas. And as this person came up with 4 of them, and you're really thinking, okay, what ideas can I come up with that represent the entire 6 quotes I've chosen and the reasoning that I wrote. And it could be one universal idea. This person chose 4, and display those somewhere prominently on your map. A few people are doing this on the computer or on Canva. It doesn't have to be fancy. This person's mind map is not fancy, but it is a visual representation. And that's the whole point. This is not an essay, but it does still mean that you're writing reasoning. And it does still mean that you have complete sentences and that you read over your sentences and they make sense and they're not missing words and there's capital letters and punctuation. That's still important. So let me know if you have questions. The annotations were due today at the beginning of class, which is Friday the 1st, and then the mind map itself is due Monday at the beginning of class because we're not working on this anymore. I do have very large paper in class. You can tape some pieces of paper together, and you can get the paper from class before you leave on Friday. And then just reach out with any questions that you have. I look forward to seeing what you've done. And I have to say that what you've done in class has been fantastic so far. Just a quick reminder, this is 50 points, summative, the final product, and then your actual annotations would be another 30-point summative. And just to point out, like this is an example of Alvin's annotation. He has highlighting, but your annotations are more than highlighting. It points out this is an again and again, and he goes on to say why. You do not need to annotate every single page, but your annotations should cover the 6 signposts across the entire scene pretty consistently.